I stood at the edge of my family's property, heart pounding in my chest, the cold evening air sharp against my skin. The old oak trees I remembered from childhood still framed the horizon, their twisted branches clawing at the fading sky like skeletal hands. But what lay beneath them made my stomach twist. Rows of cabins, 20 of them, lined the land like squat wooden soldiers. Their fresh cedar walls gleam with the arrogance of trespass, smoke curling from their chimneys as though they had every right to exist here. Gravel paths crisscross the soil where my father once plowed, where my mother once grew vegetables, where I once ran barefoot as a boy. The smell of fresh lumber mixed with the bitter tang of burning pine logs, smothering the scent of wildflowers that used to grow free. I clenched the folder tighter under my arm, the weight of my proof, deeds, tax records, faded photographs, all trembling with my fury. This wasn't just land. It was blood, sweat, and inheritance. My father's last words before he passed were still burned into me. Take care of the land, son. It will take care of you. And now, the land was stolen, not quietly, not sneakily, but boldly, brazenly, as though I had ceased to exist. I took a step closer, the crunch of gravel under my boots breaking the silence. That's when I heard laughter, low, smug, carried on the wind. A group of men leaned against one of the cabins, red plastic cups in their hands, the glow of string lights bouncing across their faces. And at the center of them, I saw him, the so-called HOA president. 30 years old, pressed polo shirt, hair slicked back like he owned the world. His voice cut through the night, smooth and confident. Can you believe it? 20 rentals. We'll triple our profit this season, and nobody's stopping us. My throat went dry, rage bubbling hot. Nobody's stopping us. He said it like a challenge, like a dare thrown into the dark. His words crackled like fire in my ears. I wanted to storm forward right then, to scream that this was my land, that I had the papers, the history, the truth. But my hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. Because if they had built 20 cabins, they thought they had already won. They thought they were untouchable. I stood frozen, hidden by the shadow of the oak. My father's land turned carnival, my inheritance turned business venture. And somewhere deep in my chest, grief and fury braided into one single vow. They thought I was gone. They thought the dead man's son would never return. But I was here, and I had receipts. The laughter from the cabins grew louder, bolder, as if mocking me. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. I could almost taste the bitterness on my tongue, the mix of betrayal and pine smoke. One question burned in my mind, louder than the wind, louder than their voices. How do you take back what's yours when the thieves have already built a kingdom on it? I should start at the beginning. My name is Thomas, 60 years old, born and raised in this county. I've lived through wars, recessions, and the slow decay of small-town America. But through it all, one thing anchored me: the land. 80 acres of rolling fields and dense forest, passed down through 3 generations of my family. As a boy, I chased fireflies through the meadow. My father taught me how to split logs with a single swing of the axe, how to track deer by their hoof prints, how to listen to the woods as though they were speaking. My mother planted rows of corn and beans, her hands dark with soil, her laughter carried on the summer breeze. This wasn't just dirt. It was memory, heritage, roots sunk deep into the earth. When my parents passed, I became the caretaker. I didn't always live there. Life pulled me into the city, jobs, marriages, losses. But the land remained, waiting for me like an old friend. Taxes were paid, deeds secured, boundaries respected. It was mine by law and blood. At least it was. 2 years ago, I took a job overseas, consulting for an engineering firm. The pay was too good to refuse, and I thought the land could wait. After all, it had waited this long. I trusted that when I returned, the oak trees would still stand, the meadow would still bloom, and the cabin my father built by hand would still smell of pine. But while I was gone, a new figure rose in town. His name was Ryan Mercer, 30 years old, slick smile, always in collared shirts that looked too expensive for our county. He moved fast, bought a small house near the lake, then another, then somehow convinced the town to form a homeowners association around the new vacation cabins popping up near the water. At first, it sounded harmless. Seasonal renters, families wanting a taste of country air, all under the watchful eye of Ryan and his shiny new HOA board. But behind the handshakes and ribbon cuttings, Ryan was busy redrawing boundaries. I didn't know it at the time. I was thousands of miles away. But neighbors whispered that Ryan was always around the courthouse, sweet-talking clerks, waving papers no one else got to see. He told folks the land up on the ridge was abandoned, that the heirs had moved on, that it was ripe for development, and slowly, quietly, he began building. The first cabin went up on the edge of my property, the part that bordered the lake. Small, unassuming, a trial balloon to see if anyone would notice. Nobody spoke up, so Ryan built another, and another. By the time I stepped off the plane last month, there were 20. 20 cabins where my mother once grew wildflowers. 20 cabins where my father taught me how to fish. 20 cabins filled with strangers who toasted marshmallows over fires lit on land they thought belonged to them. I returned on a crisp autumn morning, suitcase in hand, the air sharp with the scent of wood smoke. I drove up the gravel road, expecting to see the old family cabin waiting for me like it always had. Instead, I saw a wall of cedar siding, strings of decorative lights, and cars with out-of-state plates crammed into makeshift driveways. Confusion turned to disbelief. Disbelief to rage. I went straight to the county office, my father's deed in hand. The clerk, a woman I'd known since high school, wouldn't meet my eyes. She shifted in her chair, fiddled with papers, and finally muttered, "You'll have to take it up with the HOA." The HOA. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Since when did an HOA own farmland? That afternoon, I marched to their office. Really just a refurbished lakeside clubhouse. Ryan was there, lounging in a leather chair like he was born to it. His hair slicked back, his smile thin and sharp as a knife. "Well, well," he said, looking me up and down. "The prodigal son returns." I set the deed on his desk. "This is my land, my family's. You're trespassing." He didn't even look at the papers. He just leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head, and chuckled. "That land? It's part of our community development now. You abandoned it. The county signed off. People are already renting the cabins. You can't just waltz back in and claim it." The arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. "I have the receipts," I snapped. "The taxes, the titles. It's mine." That's when I saw the first flicker of cruelty in his eyes. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper meant to cut. "Listen, old man. Times have changed. You don't live here anymore. People like me, we make progress. People like you, you're relics. If you're smart, you'll walk away before you get hurt." Hurt. The word hung between us like a storm cloud. I left that office shaking, the folder of papers clutched to my chest. Outside, I heard children laughing, renters splashing in the lake, the thud of nails as construction continued on yet another cabin. And in that moment, the stakes crystallized. This wasn't just about dirt or lumber. It was about dignity. It was about my father's promise, my mother's memory, and my family's name. If I lost this land, I would lose everything. But if Ryan thought I was going to walk away quietly, he was gravely mistaken. Because sometimes the land doesn't just belong to you. Sometimes you belong to the land. And I wasn't going anywhere. Ryan didn't waste time after our first confrontation. If anything, it felt like he'd been waiting for me, like my return had been the last piece of a game he'd already planned out. The morning after I demanded my land back, I found a letter nailed to the door of my father's old cabin, the one place that hadn't yet been torn down. The paper was folded crisp, the HOA logo stamped at the top like some kind of royal decree. Notice of violation. It accused me of trespassing on HOA property, my own land, labeled like I was an intruder. The letter gave me 72 hours to vacate or face fines up to $500 per day. I laughed when I first read it, a bitter, hollow laugh that carried no joy. But the longer I stared at those typed words, the less funny it became. Trespassing, vacate, fines. It was absurd, but absurdity has a way of cutting deep when it comes with an official stamp. I drove straight back to the HOA clubhouse, letter in hand. Ryan wasn't alone this time. He had 3 board members with him, all in their 30s, all dressed like they'd just come from a country club luncheon. "Gentlemen," Ryan said smoothly, as if I'd walked into a meeting I wasn't invited to. "This man is claiming ownership of our community land again." "Community land?" I spat, slapping the deed onto the desk. "This is my family's property. Signed, sealed, paid. You don't own a damn inch of it." Ryan barely glanced at the papers. "That deed's outdated. Our filing superseded." He gestured lazily at the others, who nodded like puppets. "You'll find that progress doesn't wait for the past, Thomas." The board members shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. Their silence was its own form of complicity. I left that day more determined than ever. But Ryan's campaign of harassment had only just begun. Within a week, more letters came. One accused me of illegal modifications for repairing the sagging porch of my father's cabin. Another fined me $250 for unauthorized firewood storage when I stacked logs by the shed, logs cut from trees my grandfather had planted. Each letter came in the same envelope, with the same HOA seal, as though that stamp carried divine authority. I refused to pay, of course, but every refusal seemed to fuel Ryan's arrogance. The fines doubled, then tripled. Soon the letters warned of lien placement and foreclosure proceedings. Neighbors whispered when I passed through town. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered brief nods of sympathy, but said nothing. Fear hung in the air, and I began to realize why nobody had spoken up sooner. Ryan wasn't just building cabins. He was building control. I spent long evenings poring over county records, my eyes stinging under the harsh light of my desk lamp. That's when I found it, the paperwork Ryan had filed. He hadn't outright forged documents. No, he was smarter than that. He'd filed claims of abandonment, citing my overseas work, twisting absence into desertion. He'd flagged the land as unclaimed, then moved to incorporate it under the HOA's jurisdiction. It was slick, calculated, and the county, hungry for development and blinded by revenue promises, had stamped it through without so much as a phone call to me. When I confronted the clerk again, she shrugged helplessly. "It's all legal, Tom. If you want to fight it, you'll need to take it to court. Lawyers, time, money, all things Ryan knew would bleed me dry." But Ryan didn't stop at paperwork. He wanted me gone in every sense. One night, I woke to headlights cutting across the cabin walls. My heart leapt as gravel crunched outside. When I stepped onto the porch, a truck idled at the edge of the drive. The driver revved the engine, tires spitting dirt, before peeling away into the night. The next morning, I found spray-painted words scrawled across my shed. "Get out!" A few days later, a pile of dead fish was dumped on my porch. The stench clung to the air for days, sour and unmistakable. Each act was small enough to deny, but together they painted a clear picture. Ryan was sending a message, and yet, through it all, I refused to bend. Ryan loved his meetings. Every week, the HOA held gatherings at the Lakeside Clubhouse, all staged like miniature trials. Renters sat in folding chairs, sipping free coffee, while Ryan stood at the podium like a king addressing his subjects. I went once, determined to speak. When I raised my voice, holding the deed high, Ryan cut me down with a smile. "This man," he announced to the crowd, "is trying to undermine our community. He wants to take your cabins, your investments, your vacations. He doesn't care about you. He just wants to line his pockets." Boos rippled through the room. Renters scowled, whispering among themselves. Ryan had twisted the narrative perfectly. I wasn't the victim. I was the threat. I walked out with my head high, but inside doubt gnawed at me. Nights grew long. Sleep became shallow. Every creak of the floorboard set my nerves on edge. I began locking the doors, something my father never did, something that felt like admitting defeat. I thought about giving up, selling the land, walking away. The weight of 70 years of family history pressed on my chest like an iron chain. But then I'd see the oak trees at dawn, their branches silhouetted against the pink horizon. I'd hear the wind rustling through the meadow grass. I'd smell the earth after rain. And I'd remember this wasn't just mine. This was ours, my parents', my grandparents'. everyone who had walked this land before me. I couldn't let Ryan win. Not everyone bowed to Ryan. One evening, as I loaded groceries into my truck, a woman approached. Sarah, a neighbor who'd lived in town as long as I could remember. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "You're not wrong, Tom," she whispered. "That land's yours. Everyone knows it, but people are scared of him. He's got the board in his pocket, the county eating out of his hand. Be careful." She pressed a folded paper into my hand. "I thought you should see this." At home, I opened it. It was a copy of an email. Ryan bragging to a contractor about how he'd pulled strings to get the county to look the other way. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that arrogance leaves a trail. By now, Ryan walked through town like a king. He shook hands with officials, laughed with bankers, and hosted barbecues for renters who praised his vision. Every smile he wore was a dagger aimed at me. "Face it, old man," he said one evening when I confronted him near the cabins. "You're outnumbered. Outvoted, out of time. Nobody cares about a yellowed deed from 50 years ago. This land belongs to progress, now progress." That was his favorite word. Progress meant profit. Progress meant erasing history. But I swore then and there, as his smug laughter echoed across my father's fields, I would not let progress bury my family. The breaking point came on a cold November evening, the kind where the air feels like glass against your skin. I had just finished chopping firewood when the sound of heavy engines broke the quiet. I stepped onto the porch, my breath steaming in the air. Headlights flooded the clearing. 2 construction trucks rolled up the gravel path, their beds stacked with lumber and roofing tiles. Men in hard hats jumped out, their boots crunching on frozen earth. "Orders from the board," one of them called. "We're tearing this old shack down." I froze. Shack. He meant my father's cabin, the last piece of my family's home still standing. "No," I said, voice sharp as the axe still in my hand. "You're not touching it." Ryan emerged from the passenger side of one of the trucks, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, that smug smile plastered across his face. "Evening, Tom," he drawled. "You've been a real thorn in our side. But tonight, we're pruning." He waved a hand at the workers. "Tear it down." I stepped forward, blocking the porch steps. My heart hammered in my chest, but my voice rang steady. "You set one foot on these boards, and you'll regret it." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Ryan's smile widened. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, waving it like a trophy. "Court order," he said. "Filed this morning. Your cabin's condemned. Unsafe. We're doing you a favor." I snatched the paper, scanning it under the beam of a worker's flashlight. My gut twisted. It was official looking, stamped, and signed. But something about the signature, it didn't match. I'd seen that judge's handwriting before. This was a fake. "You forged this," I hissed. Ryan leaned close, his breath hot against my cheek. "Prove it." The workers hesitated, waiting for a command. My grip tightened on the axe handle. I wasn't bluffing. This was my line in the sand. Finally, Ryan snapped his fingers. "Back off." "For now, but you're done, old man. Tomorrow this place is gone." They left, engines roaring into the night. But I knew Ryan had just made his biggest mistake. Forgery wasn't a fine, it was a crime. The next days blurred into a frenzy. I took the forged order straight to the county courthouse. At first, the clerk tried to wave me off, muttering about proper channels. But when I slammed the real judge's past rulings on the desk for comparison, her eyes widened. This signature doesn't match." It was the opening I needed. I hired a lawyer, a grizzled veteran named Mark who'd fought land disputes before. Together, we gathered everything: the forged order, Sarah's email copy, photographs of the cabins, tax receipts proving I'd never abandoned the land. Mark grinned when he saw the pile. "This is good. Very good. You don't just have a case. You have a hammer." Ryan, arrogant as ever, scheduled a grand HOA meeting to announce Phase 2 of his development. 10 more cabins, a lakeside restaurant, even a private dock. It was perfect. A stage, a crowd, and Ryan in full peacock mode. Mark and I prepared quietly. Subpoenas were filed, officials notified. Even the local paper got wind of a land ownership controversy brewing. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse buzzed like a hive. Renters, board members, county clerks, everyone packed into the folding chairs, sipping coffee and waiting for the show. Ryan stood at the podium, grinning like a conqueror. Behind him, blueprints of the expansion hung on easels. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "tonight marks the future of our community. Together, we've turned wasted land into opportunity, and we're just getting started." Applause rippled through the crowd. My fists clenched. Mark nudged me. "Not yet." "Let him hang himself," Ryan launched into his pitch. Profits, growth, a shared vision. His words dripped with charm, but underneath, they reeked of theft. Finally, he gestured toward the back of the room. "Of course, we've had some resistance. A certain individual who refuses to accept progress. He clings to the past, waving yellowed papers like they mean something. But we won't let one bitter man stop our future." Laughter and murmurs rolled through the crowd. Ryan smirked, certain he had already won. That's when Mark rose, his voice booming. "Objection." The room went still. Ryan blinked. "Excuse me?" Mark strode forward, papers in hand. "This meeting is under review by the county. And you, Mr. Mercer, are about to answer for crimes." Gasps swept the crowd. Mark laid the forged order on the podium. "This document, you filed it as a court order. But it's a forgery, a felony." Ryan's smile faltered. "That's ridiculous." Mark slammed the email copy next to it. "And here we have your own words, bragging about pulling strings, about bypassing county oversight. Care to explain that?" The room erupted in whispers. Faces turned, eyes narrowed. The board members fidgeted, their loyalty cracking under the weight of evidence. I stepped forward, lifting the deed high. "This is my family's land. Paid for, protected, passed down. You thought you could erase me, but the truth doesn't die that easily." Ryan's composure was shattered. He stammered, face pale, sweat beading at his hairline. This is out of context." But Mark wasn't done. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, law enforcement is already reviewing these documents. And I assure you, fraud carries prison time." Right on cue, two sheriff's deputies entered the clubhouse. Their boots echoed on the linoleum floor as they approached the podium. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. His arrogance drained away, replaced by panic. "You can't. This is my land, my community," he sputtered. The deputies grabbed his arms, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Gasps turned to cheers. The sound thundered through the room, a wave of relief and justice long overdue. As they let him out, Ryan's eyes met mine. Gone was the smugness. Gone was the power. All that remained was fear, and in that moment, I felt the land breathe again. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Neighbors buzzing, board members resigning on the spot, renters demanding refunds. But through it all, one truth rang clear. Ryan was finished. The sheriff's car pulled away, red and blue lights flashing against the night. I stood outside the clubhouse, the deed still in my hand, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. For the first time in months, I felt free. The days after Ryan's arrest felt like waking from a long, bitter dream. For the first time in months, the land was quiet again. No headlights tearing through the night, no construction trucks growling down the gravel road, no smug laughter echoing from the cabins. Just the sound of wind moving through the oak trees and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. The sheriff called me 2 days later. Ryan had been charged with forgery, fraud, and filing false documents. The county, embarrassed by its oversight, scrambled to distance itself from him. The board dissolved almost overnight, members resigning faster than they had once nodded along to his schemes. It was over. But victory doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in ripples. With Ryan behind bars awaiting trial, the cabins stood empty, like hollow shells. Renters canceled their bookings, unsure who truly owned the property. Contractors pulled out, unwilling to tie their names to a sinking ship. I walked the property line every morning, boots crunching frost, eyes tracing the borders my father once showed me. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of memory. The county finally admitted what I'd known all along. The deed was valid, the land was mine. They rescinded the HOA's claims, nullified the fines, and restored every right that had been stolen. One official even apologized, though her words were thin compared to the months of silence. Still, it mattered. The old family cabin, my father's cabin, remained. Ryan's forged order had almost condemned it, but now it stood taller than ever, a testament to resilience. I spent weeks repairing the porch, replacing the roof shingles, and sanding the rough edges of time. Each nail I drove felt like defiance. Each brushstroke of fresh paint was a promise. This place endures. Neighbors began stopping by again. Some brought casseroles, others just stood awkwardly on the porch, muttering apologies. "We should have spoken up," they said. I didn't blame them. Fear is a powerful silencer, but one by one they came, and slowly the isolation lifted. News of Ryan's downfall spread fast. The local paper ran the headline, "HOA president charged in land fraud scheme." His face, once smug and untouchable, now stared back from mugshots plastered on every newsstand. The same people who once toasted marshmallows in his cabins whispered his name with disgust. Some of the cabins were dismantled, the wood carted away like remnants of a failed empire. Others stood abandoned, windows dark, their presence a warning of what greed can build and what justice can tear down. One evening, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sun sink behind the ridge. The land glowed gold in the fading light, fields and forests stretching wide and free. I thought about my father's words. "Take care of the land, son. It will take care of you." I had almost failed him, almost let arrogance and paperwork erase everything he'd worked for. But the land had called me back, demanded I fight, reminded me that roots don't vanish just because someone tries to bury them. Ryan thought power came from signatures, from stamps, from money. He never understood that true power comes from belonging, from history, from blood, from the unshakable bond between a man and his land. As the stars pricked the night sky, I realized this fight wasn't just mine. Everywhere people face their own Ryans, bosses, landlords, presidents of little boards who think authority is the same as ownership, people who believe fear and paperwork can outweigh dignity and truth. But they forget something. They forget that justice doesn't sleep forever, that arrogance leaves trails. The past has a way of reaching out, demanding to be honored. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand, to hold the line, to say, "No, this is mine, this is ours, and you will not take it." Today the cabins are gone, the meadow breathes free again, and the oak trees stand tall, guardians of a legacy that almost slipped away. Ryan sits behind bars, stripped of the power he once wielded like a weapon, his empire of cabins reduced to rubble, his name remembered not for progress, but for fraud. And me? I sit on the porch of my father's cabin, coffee in hand, the land stretching wide before me. Free, untouched, mine. I smile not because I won, but because justice did. And as the night settles in, I know one truth above all else. You can build 20 cabins on stolen soil, but you can't bury the roots of a man who belongs to the land.